Chapter 29 of The Seventh Most Important Thing by Shelley Pearsall. All the way to the hospital, Arthur kept thinking about what Mr. Hampton had said. It seemed like forever before the ambulance had arrived for him. Once Mr. Hampton had been loaded into it, Arthur got into one of the cop cars to ride along to the hospital. Groovy Jim stayed behind to finish working on his customer. "You sure you don't mind going by yourself?" Groovy Jim had asked before Arthur left. He nodded. Even though he wasn't really okay with it, he had no idea what he was supposed to do once they got to the hospital, or how he'd get home. He didn't even have a dime to call someone. When the cop got into the car, he turned to Arthur and said, "Bet this is your first ride in a police car, isn't it, kid?" Arthur said, "Yeah." He resisted adding that it was his first ride without handcuffs, anyhow. As the officer backed the car down the alley and sped down the block, siren blazing, Arthur kept going over and over in his mind what James Hampton had said. Had he really made all the gold and silver pieces in the garage himself? And had he really meant they were supposed to look like heaven? The place? With angels and pearly gates and all that? After his dad died, Arthur had spent a lot of time thinking about heaven, wondering if it was real and what it was like, wondering if his dad was there, despite what his stupid aunt had said at the funeral home. Sometimes in juvie, when he couldn't sleep, he would try to picture the perfect heaven for his dad. He would imagine a place full of motorcycles and lots of things to fix, because his dad always liked to tinker with stuff. A place that was sunny and warm year-round, so his dad would never have to put his Harley away. Mostly he pictured heaven being kind of like Florida, with motorcycles. But he'd never imagined finding heaven in a garage in Washington, D.C. He still couldn't quite believe what he'd seen. Had the whole thing really been made of the junk he'd collected? Arthur closed his eyes, trying to recall what the arrangement had looked like. He hadn't gotten a good look at the pieces, but it didn't seem possible that the fancy tables and chairs and pillars were made of stuff from the trash. Nobody was good at art. Nobody was that good an artist. But there were all those wings. How could you explain the wings? Mr. Hampton had taken his father's hat for the wings, and he'd signed all his notes, St. James. The grocery cart was a chariot. Hampton had told Arthur's sister. The week before, he'd sent Arthur to find a throne. Thrones, chariots, wings, saints, heaven. Arthur shook his head. It made sense and didn't make sense at the same time. But the more puzzling question was why? Why was Hampton building heaven? And Arthur glanced anxiously over his shoulder at the ambulance screaming through the rain behind them. What if Hampton died before he found out?